Hello, I'm Sabrina Dalkey, and I decided to do my paper on autonomous vehicles or self-driving vehicles and the ethics surrounding them. To start off, I'm going to give a little background on why I thought of this. I got thinking about Knight Rider. It's a show I used to watch as a kid where a guy would go around in his self-driving car and defeat bad guys. It's a very popular show. KITT was the car, and it was a fully self-driving artificial intelligent car. And I remember going, won't it be so cool to have those? And my grandfather would tell me it will never happen. Well, what was once science fiction and this amazing fantasy show is now reality. We have these self-driving cars that are on the road. They have had over 10,000 hours of testing in city driving. And there hasn't been a lot of thought on what decisions these cars are going to make. So this is going to talk about some of the ethical decisions I think are left out of the vehicle process. Now, there's some saying that we will have these vehicles in mass production by about 2020. Tesla in particular is pretty confident that will happen. Others are skeptical of it. They don't think it's quite there yet. And I float there. I don't think we're ready for these vehicles yet. I think we focus too much on the could we do something versus the should we do something. So we're going to go into that a little bit. We're going to start with BMW, who's working with Ford on their Innova car, which is a self-driving vehicle. They tag teamed it to try to solve these issues. BMW classifies autonomous as 5 different levels. So I didn't think of it until I got into this paper, but I have a very basic vehicle. It's a manual shift with manual transition and a manual window that you actually crank. I had to go on a business trip and we rented a car. Car lots are notorious for having pretty decent cars, and I had gotten upgraded to like the creme de la creme, all the bells and whistles. So I got in it, and after figuring out 20 minutes where the gas cap was, I got playing with some of the buttons and then I took off. While driving, I was in cruise control on the highway, and the car started to slow down. And I didn't think much of it because I was going up a hill, and sometimes I used to drive older cars, and they would have trouble in cruise control going up a hill. Well, it happened again driving on the highway when I started getting into traffic. The car slowed down before I did. So I got thinking about it, and I got looking at it and realized that there was a sensor in the front of the vehicle, and while in cruise control, the car would pace the car in front of it. So if my car started getting up close enough to the car in front of me, at a distance set by that sensor, it would automatically slow down. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. It's keeping me from getting too close to the vehicle in front of me. That's a form of self-driving. This car was making the decision that I was getting too close to the car in front of it and needed to slow down, and it slowed down for me. It also had those blinkers on the lanes that if I started going over one of the lines, it would buzz. It would start dinging and my seat would vibrate. So this car was trying to tell me that I was going off the side of the road. Well, in BMW's 5 levels, the first one is cruise control. Cruise control is a form of self-driving. We tell the car to sit at a specific limit and it goes, but we're still in manual control of the car. Both hands on the steering wheel, eyes looking forward, we have to be on the car. The second level is a little bit more complex, and that's what we're in now. The car, that's what the car I drove was. It had the sensor for cruise control, and it had those lane shifting lights, so I could check out a little bit. Only in cruise control, but it would keep pace with the car in front of me, and it would ding me when I got over the line. So it was telling me, and it had the little sensors that when I went to turn into a lane, it would turn yellow if there was something in my blind spot. So the car is starting to tell me stuff, even if it doesn't say it in an awesome voice like KITT. So then the next level becomes an autopilot or a co-pilot or the corrective steering. Or some of the cars, when you cross over the lanes, the steering wheel will actually veer the car back into the lane itself. Now you can manually override it, and the car still requires manual input. So the first 3 levels of autonomous vehicles, the driver is in most of the control. Driver has to have their hand on the wheels. Driver has to make sure that they're going the right speeds. Like you are still in essence driving the car, but the car is helping you. In the fourth level, the automatic steering or the co-pilot takes over, and you for the most part are still driving the vehicle, but you can take your hands off the wheels for short bursts of time. On a long stretch of highway, you could take your hands off, and as it veers over to a lane, it will center in the lane. The sensor keeps it from going. You are in a co-pilot kind of way. And then the fifth is what it sounds like. It's a fully self-driving car. You can lay down and take a nap. You can completely check out. So each level would have their own set of ethical codes, but the one we're going to focus on is the self-driving itself. So to me, I think the cars should be more of a utilitarianism programming. You want to minimize the damage, right? So the example I use is similar to the trolley problem. You've got 5 people or you've got 1 person. Who do you run over? It's going to be the 1 person. And that's what the program's going to say is the first rule is to do no damage whatsoever. If you can avoid hurting anybody, that is the first path. That is the most good for the most number of people. If it comes down to a decision, the decision is going to be the minimized damage. So if you're looking at causing a 25 pile car up or taking the car you're in and driving off the road, it should be the car you were in. Even though you're the one in the car is going to make, or the car should make the decision to save the maximum amount of people. But is that the right choice? And I would love in the comments to hear your thoughts on it. I think that's the best path. I don't think it needs to be 100% utilitarianism, but I think it should be the majority of it. The other thought process is who's responsible when an accident occurs. So I mentioned before that these vehicles have had multiple hours of testing on the road. Well, in this chunk of testing time, there have been fatalities. One of the more notable ones was in Tampa, Arizona. There was a woman who was crossing the road with her bicycle. And she was in the crosswalk, but she wasn't paying a lot of attention. The reports and police reports say she was on her phone texting. But she walked down to the crosswalk, and she walked out in a time frame that the car didn't have time to react and hit and killed her. But this car is it was self-driving. So who's responsible for it? There was a novel and a book called I, Robot, written by Isaac Aoungomous back in the 70s. And he gave 3 laws of robotics, and the first 2 revolved around not harming anybody in humanity, and the last revolves to self-preservation as long as it doesn't harm humanity. That leads to a discussion about artificial intelligence and their rights. And one of the arguments going on right now is that artificial intelligence should have the same rights as animals or the environment. Not quite human level rights, but rights on the same. So then, in the case of the car killing somebody, the driver, the responsible party, or what you want to say the responsible party, could be completely asleep because the car itself is supposed to be its own entity. It's got thinking, it's got logic, it's got protocols. So if we use the theory that artificial intelligence has the same rights of animals, the question becomes, who's responsible when we hit a moose or a bear attacks something, or you're hiking and you get mauled by a lion and you live? Do you go try to sue the mountain lion? No. So are you responsible for your medical bills? And realistically, we have insurance, and that's why we have insurance. We go to the hospital and we take care of ourselves. So when these cars hit and kill somebody, is the driver responsible, or is the company who produced the car responsible? And that's something the insurance companies are going to have to figure out, because if you're saying that as a person, I can relinquish full control to this car and it's supposed to be safe, I'm assuming I have no liabilities, that the car's thinking. It's not me thinking or making decisions. I would personally still feel very bad and emotional if I was in that car and had caused the fatality. but these are questions that aren't being answered. And so we've got to look at why they're failing. I'm currently in an engineering management class as well, and the course actually lined up pretty well with, I'm in the second half of the book, and it lined up with ethics. And one of the ethical concerns that companies have is, when are they at fault? So there's been lots and lots of famous cases of people suing companies who won or lost. And one of the concerns, one of the statements it says for a big factory or company or an automobile factory is they need to make sure that they have all their ducks in a row, so to speak. They need to make sure that their stuff is accounted for and okay. So they did their paperwork, they did their safety training, they went through all their procedures, they put the manual out for them, they've thought this all through, and they're saying this product is okay to go. So they haven't done that with these vehicles yet. So should they be allowed on the road? So in the case of the Tampa, Arizona, is it the tester who should be at fault, or is it the company who made the car that should be at fault? Did they do the appropriate testing? These questions and policies haven't been reformed. And so for us to be looking at and talking about mass production of these vehicles, there are a lot of loose threads that aren't really connected yet. The third, and what I want to say is the most dangerous loose thread, other than responsibility and potential risk of these vehicles, is third-party hackers. So a couple years ago, a hacker got into the Jeep system and hijacked it. And basically what they did is they shut down all of the Jeeps. They got into the transmission and they shut them off. They turned off the Jeeps, no matter where they were. They were in rush hour traffic. They were on back mountain roads. And they just stopped working. And that caused accidents and fatalities and deaths. And luckily, and it a huge recall on that system and all the Jeeps involved with it. So who is responsible for defending these vehicles? Once you turn over control to an automatic system like a vehicle system, who's protecting it? Is it the company? And do they have the resources able to protect it? Or is it a matter of national defense? I haven't really been able to find a good answer looking online, and I'm curious to know what you guys think. Should the government be involved with securing our defense on these systems? How many cars nowadays, if somebody hacked, not even self-driving, would put us in trouble? There are cars that don't even have keys in them anymore, that it's all electronic and system and communicating with each other. So I think they do. I think that the government needs to be working with the manufacturers and getting a good security system around how we're going to protect these vehicles and the people driving them. Because if you put something fully self-driving, you can then get into vehicles and start actually controlling it like an RC car with people in it to do maximum damage. So why haven't we been, like I said earlier, there has been a lot of focus on could we do it, that nobody looked at should we do it. So the last thing I want to touch on with that is the thought that I really do think we're going in the right direction and that these could be beneficial. However, I think that it needs to be everywhere to be beneficial. So one of the biggest problems with any kind of automatic system is humans. We're everywhere, and humans are very unpredictable. Think of your closest spouse, family member, friend. Do you know what they're going to do at any given time? How many times have you been with somebody you thought you perfectly knew and they pull something out that you're like, oh, I had no idea you like this, or you were into that, or whatever the case may be. My best friend of like 20 years pulled one on me the other day. She was like, oh yeah, I'm into blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you? Really? Like, I would have never thought she would be into it. So she got into comic books, and I couldn't believe it. So my point is, everybody's unpredictable. And you have a team of people, very intelligent people in their field, working on programming these vehicles. And programming a vehicle is not bad. It orders a set of commands, it thinks, it uses sensors, it processes, and it does it all fast. But you can't account for what people are going to do. You have, like in Tampa, the woman who walks in front of the vehicle without giving it enough time to stop. If it was a human driving that vehicle, she still would have been hit. Now, they might have swerved, being able to process a little bit more than these current vehicles can, but that's a bug that's going to be worked out. So then, how do you program for people? The best way is to take out the people, right? So if you want autonomous vehicles to be functional, you almost have to have all autonomous vehicles, so that the vehicle on your left and the vehicle on your right are talking to the vehicle you are. And there are all these machines that aren't going to do anything unpredictable. They're going to follow their code. They're going to follow their lines. They're not going to realize they missed their turn and pull a complete 90 and go in front of all other traffic. Can't tell you the amount of times that the only reason I didn't hit somebody is because I saw them further ahead doing something that I knew they were going to hit me. Like, if it wasn't for the fact that I was looking 3 lanes over, I would have T-boned somebody because they, over 5 lanes of traffic, hit a hard 90 to make an exit they missed. You almost can't account for a car doing that, or a car can't account for that all the time. So then you're taking away people's rights. Being able to own the car you want to own is a right. Do we need to take that away? No. So should we keep progressing with this? Potentially. And the potentially comes from the prospect of being able to save people. So on the flip side of all the stuff I've talked about, the unpredictability of people, the current programs, and the hacking, think about people. How many people have died in vehicles because of texting? What about drunk drivers? What about drivers on drugs? So a car won't get high. A car's not going to get drunk. And a car's not going to get distracted. People will. So, again, in a utilitarian mindset, what's the greatest good with the less harm? Are autonomous vehicles probably going to kill some pedestrians that walk out without knowing? T-bone a car that didn't give it enough time to process? Yes. I don't think you're going to ever cut out people and unpredictability. But can you prevent it? Can you minimize the damage? Can you minimize the fact that the car is going to be able to think better than a person? Is that worth the potential people who die from mechanical failures or program failures? I kind of think so. I think even though we're not going to be able to get to a fully autonomous mindset, if we can work out some of the more prominent bugs, that the fatalities that occur from it would be less than the fatalities that occur from drinking or from texting. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this. I really do look forward to hearing everybody's comments. Some questions that I just have is, do you think utilitarianism is the best way for autonomous vehicles? Do you think that in the long run they can cause more harm than good? And do you think that justifies going through it? And what are your overall opinions? Do you think that we got ahead of ourselves as humanity and that we've opened a door that we really probably shouldn't have? Let me know. Thank you.